down. The last thing Dale Whitmore said before it all came apart was, "$6, Aaron? That's the whole ball game. $6 is theft, whether it's 6 or 6 million." He was proud of that line. You could see it. He'd been saving it. The man across the desk, gray cardigan, reading glasses, pushed up into his hair a lanyard he'd already taken off and set on the blotter, did not argue. He didn't ask to see the footage. He didn't remind anyone that he was the person the branch called when other people's numbers didn't add up. He just slid his ID badge across the desk, set his 2 keys on top of it, lined up so the teeth pointed the same way, and asked a question so quiet that the assistant manager leaned in to hear it. "How long does a full trust transfer take once it's initiated?" Dale Whitmore laughed. He actually laughed a short, comfortable top-of-the-food chain laugh because he assumed the sad man in the cardigan was talking about a savings account with a car fund in it. Then Aaron Kessler turned his phone around. The number on the screen had a $sign and 8 a 6, and enough zeros after it that Dale Whitmore's laugh stopped in the middle like a record pulled off a turntable. 11 days later, the Harbor Point branch of Beacon Continental Bank was dark. The lights were off, the accounts were frozen, and there was a single sheet of paper taped to the inside of the glass door where the hours used to be. It was from the state. This is the story of how $6 turned off the lights in a bank. And the $6 is not the part you'll remember. Aaron Kessler was 43 years old and had one of those jobs that only becomes interesting the day it stops existing. His title was Reconciliation and Controls Analyst. What that meant in plain English was that Aaron was the person who made the branch's numbers agree with reality. Every night money moves through a bank in about 900 small directions, deposits holds reversals, wires, fees, corrections, and every morning somebody has to prove that the story the computer told matches the story. The money actually lived. That somebody was Aaron. He was good at it in a way that was almost boring to watch. He didn't chase. He didn't guess. He found a 2-cent difference the way other people find their own front door in the dark without thinking about it because he'd done it 10,000 times. He'd been at the Harbor Point branch 9 years. Before that, he'd done the same work at a bigger bank 2 towns over. And before that, he'd been an actuary's assistant, which is a fancy way of saying he had spent his entire adult life being the guy who says, "Wait, run that again." He wore cardigans because they had pockets, and he was always cold. He drove a 15-year-old wagon with a booster seat in the back and a crack in the windshield shaped like a river. He packed his own lunch. He was by every external measure a person could apply standing in a bank lobby exactly what he appeared to be a mid-level back-office employee with a modest life and a quiet manner. Here is what the lobby could not see. Aaron Kessler had been married to a woman named Eleanor Voss, and Eleanor Voss had died 3 years ago in March of an aneurysm that gave no warning and took no questions. She was 40. She had been standing at their kitchen counter making a grocery list. The list was still on the fridge. It said Milk Battery's birthday candles. Wyatt and then nothing because that's where it stopped. Eleanor had come from money, real old, quiet Midwestern money, the kind that doesn't announce itself. The Voss family had made industrial fasteners for 4 generations, and then sold the whole thing to a bigger company the year before Eleanor died. When the estate settled, it consolidated into a single instrument with a very long name and one job to hold the family's wealth, and give a portion of it away every year to a children's hospital foundation that had kept Eleanor's youngest brother alive when he was 6. Total value in cash bonds and liquid holdings, $86 million and change. And the sole trustee, the one human being legally responsible for that $86 million chosen by Eleanor herself in a document she'd signed 2 years before she had any reason to think it would matter, was her husband, a reconciliation analyst who packed his own lunch. Aaron had kept the trust at Beacon Continental for one reason, and it was not a smart one. It was a sentimental one. It was where he worked. It was where Eleanor had opened her first checking account at 19. He had believed the way you believe things about a place you've given 9 years to, that a bank you know is a bank you can trust. He was about to find out exactly how much that belief was worth. Down to the dollar. Down to 6 of them. 2 months before any of this, Beacon Continental installed a new reconciliation system. It was expensive and it was smart, and everyone at the branch hated it because it did something the old system never had. It flagged manual overrides. Every time a human being reached into the ledger and changed a number by hand, a correction, an adjustment, a memo posting the new system stamped it, logged, who did it, and held it in a review queue until someone signed off. Aaron loved it. Of course he loved it. It was a machine that did out loud the exact thing he'd been doing quietly for 9 years. It insisted that every number belonged to a reason. His boss, the branch manager, did not love it. Dale Whitmore had run Harbor Point for 6 years. He was 51 tall silver at the temples with the easy handshake of a man who has never once had to prove he belonged in a room. He called everyone chief and champ and boss, which is what people do when they've stopped bothering to learn names. His branch had the best fee income in the region. Non-interest income, the industry calls it. The money a bank makes on charges rather than loans. And that number had made Dale Whitmore the front runner for a regional operations job that came with a corner office and a car. Aaron didn't dislike Dale. That's important. Aaron didn't dislike much of anyone, but 3 separate times in the past year, Aaron had flagged something strange in the branch's fee income. A small rhythmic pattern of adjustments running through a suspense account. Tiny amounts over and over that reconciled themselves a few days later, like a tide going out and coming back. He'd written it up the first time. Filed it through the internal controls portal the way you're supposed to. Nothing happened. He'd written it up the second time more specifically. Nothing happened. The third time he'd just mentioned it to Dale in the hallway, coffee in hand, the way you mention weather. He'd said, "Hey, that suspense line GL0006, it's still cycling. You want me to open it up and trace it?" And Dale Whitmore had smiled and put a hand on Aaron's shoulder and said, "You're the only guy I know who'd do overtime to find $6. Leave it, champ. That's a rounding artifact from the old system. Corporate knows." Aaron had said okay. He had not opened it up. He'd think about that okay a lot later. Standing in his kitchen at 2 in the morning. It was the one thing in the whole story he was ashamed of. Here is what GL0006 actually was, though it would take Aaron 3 days and a retired woman's shoebox to prove it. It was a hole. A small, patient, extremely well-designed hole in the bottom of the branch, and money ran into it $6 at a time. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. On a Thursday in October, the new machine did the thing it was built to do. It flagged a $6 manual override that never should have existed, and it stamped a name to it. The name it stamped was Aaron Kessler's. Because whoever built the hole had gotten sloppy exactly once, had entered a seat adjustment under a borrowed login on a terminal that hadn't logged the second authentication, and the machine, not knowing any better, had assigned the orphan entry to the last analyst credential active on that station. Aaron's. $6. Under his name. 2 business days before a state banking examiner was scheduled to walk through the front door. Somebody at Harbor Point looked at that flag on Thursday afternoon and understood all at once that they had a problem with a very short fuse, and that the cleanest way to defuse it was to make sure that when the examiner arrived, the man who understood reconciliation better than anyone in the building was already gone, already discredited already. The answer to the question instead of the person asking it. Dale Whitmore called Aaron into his office at 4:10 on Friday. The examiner was coming Monday. Aaron knew that. Everyone knew that. The whole branch had spent the week tidying files and rehearsing the calm faces you make when the state comes to look at your work. What Aaron did not know was that the meeting had a second chair in it, angled toward him, and in the second chair sat a woman he'd met exactly twice. Renata Cho, the regional director. The person Dale reported to the person whose visits were rare enough that her being here on a Friday afternoon meant something Aaron couldn't yet name. "Sit down, Chief," Dale said. He was standing. Renata Cho was sitting. Aaron sat, which put him below both of them, and he noticed that because Aaron noticed things. "We've got a situation," Dale said, "and I want to handle it like adults." "Okay." Dale turned his monitor. On it was the override flag. The new machine's stark little report. A $6 manual adjustment posted to GL0006 11 days ago, credential AKESSLER. "Talk to me about this," Dale said. Aaron looked at it for a long moment. "I didn't post that," he said. "Your login did." "My login was open on a shared terminal. There's no second auth on it, see the fields blank. I never post without dual auth, it's the first thing in my own procedure. I wrote that procedure." He looked up. "Somebody used my session, or the machine misassigned it, which happens on unauthenticated entries, and I can show you 3 tickets where I flagged that exact, so it's the machine's fault. I'm saying the machine can't tell you who only which session. That's a known Aaron." Renata Cho spoke for the first time. Her voice was pleasant and completely without warmth, the tone of a person reading a verdict off a card. Do you have override authority on the general ledger? Yes, it's part of my... Do most employees mighty know? 3 of us in the branch do. So of the people who could have posted a manual adjustment to a suspense account under any login, she said, you're one of 3, and it's your credential on the flag. You understand how that looks to an examiner on Monday morning. And Aaron Kessler, who spent his whole life inside exactly this kind of logic, who knew precisely how a weak inference gets dressed up as a strong one, felt the floor of the conversation tilt. You're not asking me what happened, he said slowly. You're telling me what it's going to be. Nobody answered that. Which was the answer? Dale slid a folder across the desk. Aaron didn't open it. He didn't need to. He could see the shape of it through the manila, the way you can see the shape of a hammer through a grocery bag. Effective today, Dale said. We're separating you from the bank. Cause: unauthorized ledger manipulation and breach of control's integrity. He said it gently, which was somehow worse. I fought for you, champ. I want you to know that. I pushed for a suspension. Renata felt, given the timing, that we couldn't have an open question about controls sitting on the floor when the state's here. An open question about controls, Aaron repeated. That's me. I'm the open question. It's not personal. You're firing the branch's controls analyst, Aaron said, for a $6 entry with no dual auth on a shared terminal 48 hours before a state exam, and telling me it's not personal. He almost smiled. Dale, it's the most personal thing I've ever seen anybody do. You just picked the smallest possible number to hang it on so it'd sound absurd for me to fight it. Across the room at her station outside the glass, a young operations clerk named Colton Reese had stopped pretending to work. Colton was 24. He was 11 months in. He had watched Aaron Kessler make him look competent in front of auditors twice patiently, without ever making him feel small about it. He was watching now, and his mouth was slightly open, and he had words ready. And then Renata Cho glanced through the glass at him one flat second, and the words went back down his throat and sat there like a stone. Aaron stood up. He took off his lanyard and set it on the blotter. He took his 2 keys off his own ring, the branch key and the vault room key, and set them on top of the ID badge, and he lined the keys up so the teeth pointed the same direction, because a man who spends his life making things reconcile does not stop being that man, just because the room turned on him. Then he asked his question. How long does a full trust transfer take once it's initiated? Dale laughed. Everyone always laughs. That's the thing about this kind of story, the thing that makes it true even when it's invented. The powerful person always laughs first, because the whole architecture of their afternoon depends on the sad man in the cardigan being exactly as small as they decided he was. Depends on the account, Chief, Dale said, grinning generous now that it was over. You got a Christmas club you're mad about? I'll walk it down to Colton myself. No exit fee, my gift. Aaron took out his phone. He opened the trustee portal. His access to the trust was personal, held in his own name as fiduciary, and had nothing to do with his employee credentials, which meant it was still very much alive. He logged in. He turned the phone around and set it on the desk facing Dale Whitmore, the same way Dale had turned his monitor a few minutes before. The office got very quiet. Renata Cho leaned forward first. Renata Cho, who dealt in 9-figure numbers for a living, understood what she was looking at half a second before Dale did, and the thing that crossed her face was not embarrassment. It was calculation. It was a regional director doing math on how bad this could get. Dale's grin was still physically on his face. It just wasn't connected to anything anymore. That account, Aaron said, has been at this branch for 3 years. It represents a meaningful share of your assets under management, Dale. I'd guess close to a quarter of what Harbor Point reports. I never mentioned it because I didn't think a man should have to show his bank statement to be treated like he isn't a thief. He picked the phone back up. You asked how long a transfer takes. The answer is I initiate it Monday when the wire desk opens, which is the same morning your examiner arrives. He put the phone in his cardigan pocket. You wanted the branch's controls guy gone before the state showed up. Congratulations. You're going to get your wish and my $86 million on the same morning, and I don't think you've thought about what those two things look like sitting next to each other on an examiner's desk. He picked up the folder, his own termination letter, because it was his now evidence in a case that hadn't started yet. And he walked out through the lobby past Colton Reese, who would not sleep that night, and out into a gray October parking lot carrying a box he hadn't packed and a number nobody at Harbor Point had known he could carry. Wyatt Kessler was 9 years old and building a marble run out of paper towel tubes when his father came through the door with a cardboard box. "You're home early," Wyatt said. He didn't look up. Then he did look up because he was Eleanor's son, and Eleanor's son read a room the way other kids read a cereal box. "Why do you have a box?" "I'm taking a break from that job," Aaron said. "Did you get fired?" Aaron sat down at the kitchen table. The grocery list was still on the fridge. Milk batteries, birthday candles, Wyatt. He looked at it the way he looked at it 11 times a day without meaning to. "Somebody made a mistake," he said, "and they needed it to be somebody's fault, and I was standing in a convenient spot." "Was it your fault?" "No." "Okay," Wyatt said, and went back to his marble run because 9-year-olds who trust their fathers don't require a closing argument. That okay did more for Aaron than any lawyer would in the following month. But at 8 that night, after Wyatt was asleep, Aaron opened his laptop at the kitchen table and did the thing he was ashamed he hadn't done a year ago. He opened GL0006. His employee credentials were dead. Renata had made sure of that within the hour. But Aaron Kessler had spent 9 years being the person who could see the branch's numbers from every direction, and a man like that doesn't keep his understanding on the company's servers. He kept it in his head, and in a personal spreadsheet of reconciliation notes he'd built over 9 years for his own sanity sitting in a folder on his own laptop, entirely legally, because it contained no customer data, only patterns, dates, rhythms, the shape of the tide. He laid the shape of GL0006 out across his own kitchen table at 9 at night, and this is what it was. It was not random skimming. It was more elegant than that and colder. Beacon Continental, like every bank, charged overdraft and non-sufficient funds fees. The order in which a bank posts a customer's daily transactions determines how many of those fees hit. Post the transactions smallest to largest, and a customer with a tight balance might trip one fee. Post them largest to smallest, run the big rent check first, so the account goes negative early, so every small purchase after it also bounces, and the same customer trips 5 or 6 fees off the exact same money. Somebody at Harbor Point had built a manual override that quietly resequenced posting order on a specific class of accounts. Not everyone. The system targeted accounts that shared 3 traits: an average balance under $400, at least 1 overdraft in the prior 90 days, and no complaint on file. Working people. People living on the edge of the number. People for whom $6 was not a rounding artifact but a real thing. A thing that was sometimes the difference between the tank being full enough to get to work. The resequencing generated extra fees. The extra fees flowed into non-interest income, and the seed unit the test amount used to confirm the override was still working after each software update. The little ping to see if the tripwire was live was $6. $6 was never the theft. $6 was the thermometer. It was how they checked whether anyone was watching. Nobody was. For 3 years, nobody was. Aaron ran the arithmetic he could run from his own notes, and it came out somewhere north of $4 million spread across what he estimated at 11,000 accounts, and every dollar of it had made Harbor Point the top fee income branch in the region, and every quarter of that performance had pushed Dale Whitmore closer to a corner office and had made Renata Cho's whole region look like the best-run cluster in the bank. He sat with that until midnight. Then his phone buzzed with a number he didn't know. The voice on the other end was old and female and steady in the way of people who have decided something and are no longer afraid of it. "Mr. Kessler, my name is Ruth Delacroix. I did your job before you did, for 22 years. A pause. "I heard they walked you out today. I've been waiting 3 years for them to walk somebody out who'd know what they were looking at. I have a shoebox you need to see." Ruth Delacroix had been Harbor Point's reconciliation clerk from the year the branch opened until she retired 6 months before Aaron was hired. She had never met him, but she had spent the last 2 years of her career watching GL0006 breathe, filing 3 separate memos about it, and being told each time by a younger, taller manager with an easy handshake that it was a rounding artifact from the old system. She hadn't believed it, but she'd been 63 and 18 months from her pension, and she had a sister with dementia whose care she was paying for, and so she had done the thing that she was at 81 still ashamed of. She'd printed everything. Every anomaly report, every suspense summary, every override log she could pull in her last 2 years. She'd taken it home in a shoebox, and she'd kept her mouth shut and taken her pension and waited because she'd figured that someday the machine would get better or the branch would get sloppier and someone would come along who could read the shape of it. I couldn't be the one, she told Aaron on the phone at midnight. I want you to understand that I know what I chose, but I kept the box. That's the one thing I did right. I kept the box. Mrs. Delacroix, Aaron said. Where do you live? 40 minutes north. Why? Because I have a 9-year-old asleep upstairs and I can't leave him tonight, but tomorrow's Saturday, and I'd like to bring him to meet the woman who kept the box. There was a silence on the line that had a lot of years in it. Bring him, Ruth Delacroix said. I'll make cocoa. Tell me, does he like cocoa? He likes anything with too many marshmallows. Good, she said. Good. I've got too many marshmallows. Renata Cho did the math faster than Dale did, which is why Renata Cho was the one who called Aaron on Saturday morning. Aaron, it's Renata Cho. I want to start by saying yesterday moved too fast. That's on me. I let the timing of the exam drive a personnel decision, and that was poor judgment, and I'd like to fix it. Aaron was in his car with Wyatt 40 minutes north, a shoebox already riding in the back seat. Fix it how, he said. We rescind the separation. Full reinstatement, clean record, nothing in your file. I'll regrade your role. You've been underleveled for years, frankly, and I can fix that Monday. And I think given everything, a retention adjustment is appropriate. Meaningful. We value you. You value the $86 million. I value an employee who was treated unfairly on my watch. Smooth. Practiced. The trust is a separate conversation, and I'd never dream of conditioning one on the other. You just had them in the same sentence twice, Aaron said. Silence. Renata, he said. Yesterday, before you knew about that account, you looked me in the eye and let a man fire me for $6. You both knew I didn't move. The account didn't make you honest. It made you scared. And I've spent 9 years learning to tell the difference between those two things, because a bank runs on exactly one of them, and it's not the one you're feeling right now. Aaron, I'm going to give you a piece of information, and I want you to notice how you react to it, because I think you'll learn something about yourself. He glanced in the mirror at Wyatt, who was watching a paper towel tube like it was television. The $6 entry that got flagged under my login. It's a seed. It's a test ping for a posting order override running through GL0006. It's been running 3 years, and it has resequenced transactions on roughly 11,000 of your lowest balance customers to manufacture overdraft fees you then booked as performance. The silence on the line changed temperature. Aaron had learned to hear that. It was the specific silence of a person who is not surprised, of a person who already knew the words posting order and GL0006, and had been hoping very much that he didn't. You knew, he said quietly. You didn't know I'd found it, but you knew what it was. I don't know what you're talking about, Renata Cho said and hung up. And in the space where a confused person would have said what override an honest person would have said, my God, are you serious? And a guilty person said nothing at all. Aaron Kessler heard everything he needed to hear. He looked in the mirror. Bud, he said, how do you feel about a woman named Ruth who has too many marshmallows? Is she nice? I think she might be one of the bravest people either of us ever meets. Does brave mean marshmallows? Today, Aaron said brave means marshmallows. A trust transfer request of $86 million does not sit quietly. When Aaron initiated it Monday morning from a coffee shop on his phone with a children's hospital charity as a copied beneficiary and a fiduciary's COM, it did exactly what large numbers do inside a small bank. It set off an escalation flag, and the flag climbed, and by Monday afternoon it had climbed all the way to the one desk at Beacon Continental, where it could not be quietly turned off. Warren Ellison had been chief executive of Beacon Continental for 9 years. He was 58. Beacon was not a giant. It was a state-chartered bank with 40-some branches. The kind of institution that still knew most of its commercial clients by name. The kind that describes itself in its lobby posters as your community's bank, and once in a while actually means it. Warren had spent 9 years keeping it independent while bigger banks circled, and independence for a bank. Beacon's size is a game measured in liquidity ratios and regulatory confidence. Two things an $86 million outflow and a state exam in the same week could gut simultaneously. He read the escalation. He read the name on the trust. And then, because Warren Ellison had not kept a small bank alive for 9 years by being stupid, he pulled the personnel record attached to the trustee and found dated the previous Friday a termination for cause. He read it twice. Then he called Aaron directly. Mr. Kessler, Warren Ellison Beacon Continental. I run the bank. No warmth, no chill, just a man who'd cleared his schedule. I'm looking at two documents. One is an $86 million transfer out of my institution. The other is a termination that says you manipulated a ledger for $6. I've been doing this a long time, and those two documents do not belong to the same person. So I'd like you to tell me plainly what happened at Harbor Point. Aaron told him. He told it the way he told everything in order, without heat, each fact carrying its own weight. The flag, the absent dual auth, the shared terminal, the suspense line he'd reported 3 times and been waved off, the posting order override, the $6 thermometer, the 11,000 accounts, the retired clerk with a shoebox full of the same pattern going back to before Aaron was hired. Warren Ellison listened without interrupting once. When Aaron finished, there was a pause, and then Warren said the most important sentence anyone at Beacon Continental would say in the whole affair. I'm not going to tell you I believe you. I don't know you. But I've run this bank for 9 years, and in 9 years, nobody has ever explained a fraud to me from the inside out, while their own name was still on the accusation. Liars work the other direction. They start with themselves and work outward. He exhaled. I'm going to send someone. Today. Not to save the bank. To find out what my bank is. Send who? Her name is Nadia Okafor. She runs internal audit, and she reports to me and to no one at the regional level, which is the only reason this bank has a prayer of surviving what you just told me. A beat. Will you hold the transfer for 72 hours? Not cancel. Hold. Aaron thought about it. I'll hold it, he said, on conditions. Name them. Nobody at Harbor Point touches a record. Legal hold tonight on the branch's entire ledger archive, including the backups, because someone is going to try to delete GL0006 the second they hear the word audit, and I want it preserved before they do. Colton Reese, the ops clerk who watched them fire me, gets protected. No adverse action, no pressure, nothing. Ruth Delacroix's shoebox gets treated as evidence, and Ruth Delacroix gets treated as a witness, not a liability. And whatever Ms. Okafor finds, the 11,000 customers get made whole. Not settled quietly, made whole. That last one could cost more than your transfer. Then it should have cost less to steal from them, Aaron said. There was a silence. 72 hours, Warren Ellison said. Ms. Okafor lands at Harbor Point at 6 a.m. At 11:40 that night, someone inside Harbor Point issued a deletion command against the branch ledger archive, targeting the suspense account history for the trailing 36 months. It executed cleanly. GL0006's local history vanished. But Warren Ellison's legal hold had gone out at 9 p.m., and part of a legal hold at a real bank is a mirrored off-site backup that a branch-level command cannot reach. The deletion erased the copy on the floor. It did not erase the copy in the vault 3 states away. Whoever pressed that command had just done the single most useful thing anyone did for Aaron Kessler's case all week. They had proven with a timestamp that they knew exactly what was in GL0006 and wanted it gone the night the auditor was named. The override that ran the deletion required regional-level credentials, not branch. Regional. Nadia Okafor did not look like a wrecking ball, which is part of why she was so effective at being one. She was small and precise and spoke rarely and wrote constantly, and she arrived at Harbor Point at 5:58 in the morning with 2 laptops and a court-ready evidence protocol and absolutely no interest in anyone's version of events. She had run internal audit at Beacon for 6 years by following one rule which she stated exactly once to Aaron over the worst coffee in the building. I don't chase people. People lie. I chase the ledger. The ledger is the only thing in a bank that has never once been embarrassed by the truth. She and Aaron worked for 2 days. Technically, Aaron was a terminated employee and had no business inside anything. Nadia solved that in a sentence. She deputized him as a fiduciary witness, and a subject matter consultant to the audit put it in writing and dared anyone to object. Nobody did. Warren Ellison had made the shape of his intentions very clear, and at Harbor Point on Tuesday morning people were beginning to arrange themselves according to which way they thought the wind was about to blow. What Nadia reconstructed from the off-site backup cross-referenced against Ruth Delacroix's shoebox, which turned out to be the missing 3 years on the front end of the pattern, was not a story of one bad branch manager stealing. It was an architecture. GL0006 had been created 3 years earlier. It was created not at the branch level, but at the regional server tier under a change ticket that described it as a yield optimization reconciliation buffer. The description was engineered to be exactly boring enough to survive a compliant skim. Words that sounded like process and meant nothing. Its function was the posting order resequencing Aaron had described, and its targeting logic was even colder than he'd guessed. The system didn't just pick low-balance, overdraft-prone, no-complaint accounts. It had a fourth filter, and the fourth filter was the one that made Nadia Okafor put down her pen and sit still for a full minute. When a customer did complain when someone caught a fee and called in angry, the system flagged that account as complaint active and stopped touching it for 6 months. It didn't refund the past fees. It just went quiet, apologized on the individual charge if pushed and moved on and waited and came back. The scheme was built to be invisible to exactly the people who might report it, and relentless toward exactly the people who wouldn't. Total across 3 years and roughly 11,200 accounts, an initial reconstruction of $4,200,000. That money had flowed up through Harbor Point's non-interest income, which made Dale Whitmore a star, which made Renata Cho's region the model cluster, which generated bonuses and evaluations, and a promotion track for a branch manager and a regional director, who had both on the record been briefed by Aaron Kessler's own filed reports, and had both on the record held those reports at the branch level, so they never climbed to a desk like Nadia's. Aaron had flagged it 3 times. 3 times it had died in Dale Whitmore's inbox. And the Friday the machine finally accidentally stamped it with a name Dale and Renata had understood one thing with perfect clarity. If Aaron Kessler was still in the building, still curious, still credentialed, still capable. When the state examiner arrived on Monday, he would trace the $6 seed straight into GL0006, and the whole architecture would come down. So they'd tried to make him the architecture instead. It was Nadia observed dryly, closing her laptop on Tuesday night. The single dumbest smart plan I have ever audited. They framed the one man in the building who could read the frame. Colton Reese called Aaron on Wednesday morning. He had not slept in 5 days, and it was in his voice. He said he wanted to talk to whoever was official and he wanted to tell the truth, and he was scared because Renata Cho had put a statement in front of him on Monday afternoon, a statement Colton was supposed to sign describing Aaron's history of unauthorized ledger access, and Colton had not signed it, and he'd been moved to a back-office desk with no customer contact, ever since, which everybody in banking knows is the hallway they put you in before they walk you out. She told me the $6 needs a responsible party, Colton said, and if it's not you, it's the ops clerk whose terminal it posted from. That's me, Aaron. It posted from my station. My login was open when somebody used yours. I don't even understand how, but she made it sound like, Colton, stop, breathe. Aaron's voice was the same voice he'd used to make this kid look competent in front of auditors a year ago. You didn't do anything. Your open session is proof the seed was posted by someone borrowing credentials because you were at lunch and I was in a meeting, and the log knows both of those things. You're not the responsible party. You're the alibi. For both of us. I'm the what? Call Nadia Okafor. Tell her exactly what you told me, that Cho put a statement in front of you that you refused, that they moved you to the back. All of it. A beat. Colton, the job you're scared of losing already stopped being the job you thought it was 3 years before you got here. The only thing you actually have left to protect is your name. Protect that. Colton called Nadia Okafor at 9:15. By noon, the statement Renata Cho had drafted for him to sign was itself the evidence a regional director in writing coaching, a coerced statement against a terminated whistleblower during an active audit. Nadia added it to the file with the particular satisfaction of an auditor who has just been handed the thing she would otherwise have had to prove. Renata Cho made her move Thursday morning, and it was the move that experienced operators make when the ground is going, and they've decided the only thing left to save is themselves. She submitted a memorandum to Warren Ellison's office. It framed GL0006 as a rogue initiative, an unauthorized local optimization that Dale Whitmore had built and run at the branch level without regional knowledge or approval. She attached email threads. The threads were detailed, internally consistent, and dated in a way that put the entire origin of the scheme inside Harbor Point, with Renata cast as the concerned regional director who'd caught it. The threads were fabricated. Nadia Okafor identified this in under 5 hours because fabricated email threads have to be reconstructed, and reconstruction leaves fingerprints in the metadata that the visible text never shows. The server logs at the regional tier told a different story than the printed threads did, and the change ticket that created GL00063 years earlier had been authored from a regional workstation under a login that was not Dale Whitmore's. It was Renata Cho's. Dale Whitmore found out about Renata's memo the way you'd expect a man like Dale to find out, not through a conversation, but by noticing that no one from the regional office was returning his calls. He'd spent 6 years being loyal to Renata Cho. He'd held Aaron's reports at the branch level because she'd told him to. He'd fired a single father over $6 because she'd sat in his office and made it feel like the mature, controlled, protect the institution thing to do. And now his own regional director had drafted a document that made the whole 3-year architecture his idea alone at the branch, and had signed it, and had sent it up the chain toward the one desk that decided who Beacon Continental threw overboard. Dale Whitmore had built his entire adult identity on being the kind of man who belonged in the room. And on Thursday afternoon he learned all at once what the room had actually thought of him, which is that he was a surface you could write on. He called Aaron, not Nadia, not Warren. Aaron, the man he'd fired 6 days earlier. "I need to meet with you," Dale said. His voice had lost all its champ and chief. "Somewhere that isn't the bank." They met at a diner off the highway, the kind with laminated menus and a coffee pot that never stops. Dale looked like he'd aged a decade in a week. He had a manila envelope. He set it on the table between them and did not let go of it for a moment. "She's going to make it me," he said. "All of it. She built the thing. She wrote the ticket. I ran it. I know I ran it. I'm not telling you I'm clean. But she built it, and she's writing it. So it was me, and I found out because I've got 26 months of emails where she walks me through exactly how to hold your reports at the branch, exactly how to describe GL0006, if anyone asked exactly what to say the day the machine flagged your login." He pushed the envelope an inch toward Aaron. "It's all in here. The originals, not reconstructions. The real threads with the real headers off my personal archive." Aaron looked at the envelope. He didn't touch it. "Why me?" he said. "You could take this to Okafor, to Ellison, to the state. Why the guy you fired?" Dale Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. "Because I need to hand it to somebody who will actually read all 11,000 names," he said finally. "Ellison wants to save the bank. Okafor wants a clean file. The state wants a scalp. You're the only one in this whole thing who's been talking about the customers like they're real people the entire time, and I—" His voice caught, and he was clearly as surprised by that as Aaron was. "My branch did that to 11,000 people who lived on the edge of the number. I sat in the top fee income branch in the region for 3 years, and I told myself it was because we ran a tight ship. It was because we ran a tide. $6 at a time from people who couldn't afford $6. He let go of the envelope. "I don't get to be forgiven for that," Dale said. "I know that, but I get to be the one who handed it to the guy who'd read the names. That's the only thing left that I get to choose." Aaron took the envelope. Inside was 26 months of correspondence, and the last item dated 11 months earlier was a payment authorization, a consulting fee of $900,000, routed through a vendor shell that provided no identifiable service approved with a signature that belonged not to Renata Cho and not to Dale Whitmore, but to a member of Beacon Continental's board. The tide had gone all the way to the top. Here is the part that gives the title its meaning. Because a man withdrawing $86 million does not by itself shut down a bank. What shut down the bank was everything the $86 million made visible on its way out the door. Nadia Okafor delivered her findings to Warren Ellison on Friday, 6 days after Aaron Kessler set his keys on a blotter. Warren Ellison had a choice, and it was the same choice every executive in every one of these stories has, and most of them get it wrong. He could contain it. He could reinstate Aaron, pay him generously, wrap the whole thing in a confidentiality agreement, quietly refund the loudest customers book, the rest as a remediation reserve, characterize GL0006 as an isolated regional error discipline Renata Cho behind closed doors, and pray the state examiner arriving Monday never pulled the thread. Small banks survive on regulatory confidence. Self-reporting a 3-year, $4 million, 11,000 victim scheme with a board member's signature on a shell payment was in the cold arithmetic of institutional survival close to suicidal, Warren Ellison self-reported. He did it Monday morning before the examiner sat down in a written disclosure to the state banking authority that laid out the architecture of GL0006, named it, quantified it, and committed the bank to full reimbursement of all affected accounts. He did it, he told his board in a meeting. Several of them never forgave him for, because a bank that needs a fraud to hit its numbers is not a bank I'm interested in saving, and if that's what we are, the state should shut us down because that's the state's job. The state did something close to that. The banking authority issued a cease and desist against the branch's fee operations within 72 hours. It placed Beacon Continental under what's formally called prompt corrective action, the regulatory equivalent of an ambulance ride, which restricts what a troubled bank can do while examiners take it apart. And it ordered the Harbor Point branch the epicenter, the branch whose entire reported performance turned out to be built on resequenced overdraft fees, closed pending a full charter review of that location. 11 days after Dale Whitmore told Aaron Kessler that $6 was the whole ballgame, the Harbor Point branch went dark. The lights off. The accounts migrated to servicing. A single sheet of paper taped inside the glass door on state letterhead, explaining in the flat language of regulators that this location had ceased operation. And within the year, Beacon Continental, the small independent your community's bank. Beacon Continental could not carry the reimbursements, the penalties, the legal costs, and the collapse in regulatory confidence all at once. It was absorbed into a larger institution in a state-supervised transaction. The name came off the buildings. The independence Warren Ellison had spent 9 years defending ended not because he lied, but because he finally refused to. He would say later that it was the proudest failure of his career. That's not a contradiction. It only sounds like one if you've never had to choose between the two. Renata Cho was terminated for cause the day Nadia Okafor matched the GL0006 change ticket to her regional login. Her fabricated memo, the one designed to make Dale the sole architect, became in the state's hands evidence of obstruction rather than a defense because you do not manufacture email threads about a scheme you had no part in. The consulting shell payments were referred to the State Financial Crimes Division. She is at this writing not permitted to hold a management role at any insured institution, and the industry, as Nadia likes to say, has a long memory for the difference between a mistake and a design. Renata Cho built a design. Everyone who reviews the file can see the seams. Dale Whitmore was also terminated and also referred, and this surprised no one, including Dale. But the envelope he carried into a highway diner mattered. It did not make him innocent. He ran the scheme for 3 years and got rich enough on the bonuses to buy a boat he named without apparent irony, Reconciled. But it collapsed Renata Cho's version of events in a single afternoon, and it did so voluntarily, and the difference between a man who is caught and a man who walks in and sets the envelope down is a difference the state noticed. He will not work in banking again. He wrote Aaron one letter later, and it was 4 sentences long, and the last sentence was, "I told myself the number was the number. You were the only one who kept saying the number was a person." Aaron read it once and did not answer it, which Dale in the same letter had said in advance would be fair. The board member whose signature sat on the shell payment resigned by email at 11:40 on a Sunday night, which, as Warren Ellison observed, is not when institutional decisions get made, unless the decision cannot survive until morning. Colton Reese was protected exactly as Aaron demanded. He kept his name. When the Harbor Point branch closed and its staff scattered, Colton was one of 2 employees Nadia Okafor personally recommended for transfer, with a note in his file that read, "Refused to sign a false statement under pressure during an active audit. Rare. Retain. He is 25 now, and he is training to do reconciliation, which he says is because he watched a guy in a cardigan get walked out for it and wants to be the guy they can't walk out." Ruth Delacroix, the woman with the shoebox, testified. At 81 in a room full of lawyers, she described the 3 memos she'd filed and the 6 years she'd waited, and the shoebox she'd kept, and she apologized on the record for the 2 years she'd stayed quiet while 18 months from a pension she needed for a sister she loved. Nobody in that room accepted the apology because nobody in that room felt she owed one. The state's report cited her preserved records as the evidentiary spine of the reconstruction. Aaron brought Wyatt to visit her twice more before she passed the following spring. There were both times too many marshmallows. Nadia Okafor was named to lead a new independent audit authority in the acquiring bank, reporting to the board rather than through any regional layer the exact structural fix that would have caught GL00063 years and $4 million earlier. She kept one souvenir from Harbor Point, a printout of the $6 override flag, the one stamped with Aaron's name. She has it on her office wall. Under it she wrote one word. The word is thermometer. Warren Ellison did not survive as a CEO, and did survive as a person, which he has said more than once in the small speaking career he now has, are not the same ledger and should never be reconciled against each other. He does not describe the self-report as brave. He describes it as the first honest number I'd booked in a year, and honest numbers cost what they cost. The 11,200 customers were made whole. All of them. It took the acquiring bank 14 months, and it cost more than Aaron Kessler's entire trust transfer, which was, as Aaron had told Warren Ellison on the phone that first night, rather the point. Somewhere in the reimbursement run was a single mother named Deborah, who had been charged over 3 years a total of $294 in overdraft fees, generated by resequenced posting order money, that had on 4 separate occasions been the exact reason a tank of gas didn't happen, a shift got missed, a job got lost. $294. 49 seed tests of 6. She wrote Aaron a letter. We'll get to the letter. Aaron Kessler moved the Voss Family Heritage Trust out of Beacon Continental the Monday morning the Examiner arrived, exactly as he'd said he would. Not out of spite. He was careful about this later when people wanted to make him a folk hero. He'd remind them that a trustee has an obligation that has nothing to do with his feelings, and that the obligation forbids parking $86 million in an institution under active regulatory investigation, no matter how sincerely that institution has begun to tell the truth. Eleanor had written the governance standard herself. It preceded Aaron's anger and outlasted it. He was simply the man holding the pen at the moment it came due. He moved it to an independent trust bank, 2 states over the kind of institution that does one thing and does not run a branch network on overdraft fees, and he directed a larger annual share of the trust's charitable distribution. Eleanor's share, the Children's Hospital share, toward of all things financial counseling programs for exactly the kind of low-balance edge-of-the-number families that GL0006 had been designed to bleed. He did not buy a different house. He did not buy a different car. The wagon still has the river-shaped crack in the windshield, and Wyatt has asked twice why they don't fix it, and Aaron has said twice that some cracks you keep because they remind you which windshield is yours. He did start something. Not a firm exactly. A clinic. He calls it a reconciliation clinic, which makes people assume it's for money, and it is, but not the way they think. It's a free service funded by the trust that helps working families' elderly account holders. Small nonprofits, and anybody who asks, pull their own bank fee histories and read them. Just read them. Find out what the numbers actually did. It turns out that when you teach a person to reconcile their own account, you hand them a small permanent immunity to being told that $6 is a rounding artifact. Demand has been higher than he expected. He hired Colton eventually, and a retired examiner, and part-time a college kid who reminds everyone a little of who Colton was. Wyatt Kessler is 10 now. He knows the outline of what happened in the version A Father Tells a Son. He knows his dad got blamed for something he didn't do, and that instead of yelling, his dad went home and opened a laptop and drove north to meet a woman with a shoebox. He knows the bank where his mom opened her first account when she was 19 isn't there anymore, and he has complicated feelings about that, and Aaron lets him have them because that's what the feelings are for. One night at the kitchen table, the grocery list's still on the fridge. Milk batteries, birthday candles. Wyatt, because Aaron will take that list down the day he's ready, and not one day sooner. Wyatt asked the question kids ask when they've been turning something over for a while. Dad, was it the 86 million that made them stop? Aaron thought about how to answer that honestly, which is the only way he knows how to answer his son. No, he said. The 86 million just made them willing to sit in the same room with me. That's all money ever does. It buys you the room. It doesn't buy you the truth. You still have to bring that in yourself in a shoebox with your name on it, whether anybody's ready to look or not. So what actually stopped them? Aaron looked at the fridge for a second. At the list. At the Wyatt with 2 exclamation points in Eleanor's handwriting forever. Somebody kept the box, he said. That's the whole thing, bud. A bunch of people decided $6 was too small to be worth their attention, and one woman decided it wasn't, and she kept the box for 6 years until somebody came along who could read it. He reached over and tapped the top of his son's head gently, the way you check that a thing is still there. Be the one who keeps the box. That's it. That's the whole ball game. A week after the Harbor Point branch went dark, a padded envelope arrived at the reconciliation clinic. Inside was a letter from a woman named Deborah, the single mother, the $294, the 49 tanks of gas, that $6 at a time had quietly decided she couldn't have. She wrote to say the reimbursement check had cleared. She wrote to say she hadn't known all those years that the order her transactions posted in was a choice somebody made, that her own money had been arranged against her by a person she'd never met to hit a number on a report she'd never see. She wrote to say thank you for looking at something everyone else had decided was too small to matter. Folded inside the letter was a crayon drawing from her daughter. It showed a gas station and a car with a full tank and a sun with too many rays, and along the bottom in the careful, oversized letters of a first grader it said, "We made it to Grandma's." Aaron Kessler put the drawing in a plain frame on the wall of the clinic next to the door where everyone who walks in has to pass it. He did not frame the $6 flag. He did not frame the termination letter. He did not frame the number that made a bank sit in a room with him. He framed the drawing of a full tank of gas. Under it on a small card he typed one line, and it is the only mission statement the clinic has ever had. Every number is somebody's tank of gas. All right. Let's be honest with each other the way Aaron would want. Aaron Kessler isn't real. Neither is Dale Whitmore or the woman with the shoebox or the branch on Harbor Point that went dark with a state letter taped to the glass. But GL0006 is real. Not by that name. By 1,000 names. Banks have paid billions with a B in real settlements over real posting order resequencing, real fee harvesting off the lowest balance customers. Real schemes built on the exact principle at the center of this story, that if you take a small enough amount from people who are watched closely enough by nobody, you can do it for years. The $6 is invented. The design is not. Somebody right now is running a version of it, and it works for the same reason it always works, because $6 sounds too small to fight about, and the people it's aimed at are the people with the least room to fight. So here's what I actually want to leave you with. The villain in this story was never really Dale Whitmore, and it wasn't even Renata Cho. Those two just ran the machine. The real villain was the idea that a number can be too small to be a person, that $6 is a rounding artifact, that 11,000 accounts is a fee line, that the tank of gas is a data point. Aaron beat it with exactly one thing, and it wasn't the 86 million. It was a woman who refused to agree that $6 was too small to keep a box for. So let me ask you, if your bank quietly took $6 from you, an amount too small to notice, too small to call about, too small to fight, would you catch it? Would you keep the box? Or would you decide, like almost everyone does, that it's not worth your afternoon? Be honest. Tell me down in the comments. I read them. And if you've ever looked at your own statement and felt that little flicker of wait, run that again type, run that again below and go see how many people are down there with you. It's going to be more than you think. It always is. If this one landed, hit like so it reaches the next person who's about to be told their $6 don't matter, and subscribe. There's a new one every week. Take care of each other out there. And keep the box.